Masters and sports for 60 years, and always said his favorite person he ever covered was Billy Joe Patton, and that ran from Arnold Palmer to David Thompson to everybody. And so it's nice to be here representing him, and mostly I'm going to pull stories out of Mr. Smallwood here, who was there and saw it and lived it and understood what Billy Joe Patton meant, not just to golf, but particularly to this area. Harris Crevo has written a great sort of biography, summarization of Billy Joe's career in here, but just to get us started, I'll run through a couple highlights. He was a 5-time Walker Cup member, was captain of one of the teams. Like Mr. Smallwood, he was inducted into multiple Halls of Fame. Most of us never get one. You guys get multiples. Won a couple of Carolinas and the Carolinas Open, 3 Norths and Souths, Southern Amateur, so many tournaments. I mean, he was part of the fabric of the game here. And not just here, but beyond. And what speaks to it better than anything is he was 1982 the winner of the Bob Jones Award. It's the highest award the USGA gives, and it just speaks to what he meant to the game. For those of us who grew up hearing the stories more than seeing him play, we all know about the 1954 Masters when he nearly won as an amateur down there. He played in 14 Masters, finished tied for 3rd in 54, missing the playoff with Sam Snead and Ben Hogan by a shot. Finished tied for 8th twice in 58 and 59. Had 2 top 10s in the US Open. We could go on and on. But I think, and Erwin will tell us more about this, but I think what I understood, as much as what he did on the golf course, it was how he did it, the way he pulled people in, the way people came from the mountains to go watch him play. In the Golf Journal, the old USGA magazine, they once wrote of Billy Joe, said, his enthusiasm is such that he could probably make reading the Dewey Decimal System sound like an exciting way of life. You know, he played in what was the golden age amateur golf with Harvey Ward and Charlie Coe and Bill Campbell. And, you know, it's like looking at those great old movies, like even now, if I'm flipping television, Casablanca's on, I can't not stop and watch part of it because it's so good. And it's like hearing Billy Joe Patton stories. So while I have some other stuff here, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Smallwood, who was there and could tell us what it was like and what he was like.
First of all, my name is Irvin. I'm not Mr. He's respectful. I think that's nice. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'm old enough to have written about Aggie, and she was a great player. And of course, Hugh Morton is a good friend of mine for many, many years. I agree with his dad. I'm often asked. I started covering sports in North Carolina right after World War II, and I've been observing it up close ever since. Now, I'm often asked, who's the most exciting? Who's your favorite athlete or coach you ever covered? It rolls right off your tongue. Billy Joe Patton. There was none before. The only person that I would say set this state alive more than equal to that might have been Charlie Justice, but I don't think Charlie's never quite got the scope that Billy Joe did on a national scale. And one of my favorite stories that I think shows how much magnetism he had was this is the 1987 Masters, and this is now 54, 37, whatever. He's 33 or 4 years since his near miss. And Ron, his dad, and I were walking. We always had a keen eye for Billy Joe just to talk to him at the Masters. That day, I think he had been assigned to the 7th green as the referee or the rules man there. And all of a sudden, we turned around, and there's Billy Joe on the putting green. And we were like, what the hell is he doing on the putting green? And we turned around, and he comes out through the thing, and we said, what's going on? He said, I'm playing. And he had been recruited all of a sudden as a marker for David Frost. Because I believe it was Peter Jacobson or somebody that had to withdraw, and so they sent Billy Joe volunteered him to go as his marker. And you could hear the crowd say, that's Billy Joe, that's Billy Joe. And by the time they got to the 3rd hole, the people were coming from everywhere to see him play. And one of the funny things on that 3rd hole, he hold a gagger from just off the green, and everybody roared, "Well, Billy Joe made a break." No, Billy Joe laughed. He said he didn't know that was for a bogey. But anyway, he played around, and it's just incredible how the people just were drawn to him. And when he got to the 18th hole, as his wont, he sort of duck hooked it into the woods, and he had, as he would say, he lived there a while when he was playing golf, and he chipped it out in the fairway, then and knocked it on the green, and about 8 feet from the hole, and made it for a birdie, and the people just went nuts. And he went over. Billy Joe had a little bit of impishness to him, and he went over there and he pulled that thing out of the hole, and I thought he was going to dance a jig, and he was just going. No matter that he shot 87 that day. He got a bigger ovation for shooting 87 than most everybody else would by shooting 67. So that's one of my. I think that showed something. That was 30 years after he had made the big splash, and people still hit its magnet. Of course, you have to be a little older now to remember who he was, but he's certainly a legend there. Go ahead.
Joe Dye, who was one of the legendary leaders of golf through the years, was quoted as saying of Billy Joe, "He has returned to what golf is meant to be: hard play, but a good time." And I guess 1954, the Masters, where he started the final round 5 shots back. Were you there?
No.
5 shots back. He ends up acing the 6th hole, gets into the in contention there. And I have a quote there that Bob Jones said, "The china started rattling and the walls trembled. I had to go out on the porch to see what Billy Joe was doing, because that was the impact he had." He famously then got to the 13th hole, had a 225-yard shot with a 4-wood that cleared the water and kicked back in, and he made double bogey. I think sniffed it at the next hole for birdie at 14, but ultimately lost by 1 shot, hit it back in the water at 15. But is that where he had this famous quote about talking to the gallery about not a funeral?
No, that was on the 14th. After he had double bogeyed 13, he hit it, almost hold it on 14, and he turned to the guy and said, "Let's all smile again."
Let's smile again.
Let's all smile again. Let me tell you something about the hole in one on the 6th hole. He said that Hogan was playing the 3rd hole same time with a great big crowd. He had nobody almost with him. He said they came through. People started coming through the woods like they were sucked by a vacuum cleaner. He got a bigger ovation for taking the ball out of the hole than for putting it in the hole.
If you saw the pictures out there, and there's a great one of him in the media center at Augusta National, of him just ripping into a fairway wood. I mean, I didn't see him play, but you read about his swing, and it was quick to say the least, particularly the backswing. He played with sort of a vicious power, but sort of a homemade golf swing. But it seemed to just be who he was. I mean, and the way, my dad once wrote of him, said he had a name out of a country song, and he talked like Sheriff Andy Taylor. The way he played drew people to him. And you watched him play. I mean, at the Memorial Tournament last week, knowing I was coming up here, I had a couple minutes to talk to Jack Nicklaus. I said, "What do you remember about your time with Billy Joe?" And he talked about some Walker Cup things, teams they were on. So we played a lot of matches, how Billy Joe liked to needle him. I asked Nicklaus who won more of those matches, and he claimed he didn't remember, which means he remembers the I said, "So describe to me what Billy Joe was like as a player." And Jack sat there and thought, well, you'd watch him swing and you'd go, "Really?" Because he just had hands like nobody else and could chip and putt. You saw him play. What was he like?
Well, I think somebody said it looked like a caveman killing lunch. We asked Joe Chavis, his pro, most of my working, he was having a slump. Said, what's wrong with Billy Joe's swing? Said, the problem is, no, he said he's home working on his swing. So the problem is he ain't got one. Well, one other thing, most people don't know what the first shot he ever hit at Augusta in the Masters? It was a 338-yard drive to win the long driving contest.
Yeah, so the first ball, he put through the other two balls away.
That's right, he was something else. Go ahead.
According to one of the stories, I mean, he almost won that Masters as an amateur in 1954, and in a Sports Illustrated story, he claimed to have rehearsed his acceptance speech on the drive down there that week. That's how confident he was.
He didn't, he said, I've heard him say that. Yeah.
You know, I don't guess that
But he used to worry that he said he worried that he might win the tournament.
he worried that
He worried that he might win the tournament because he didn't know what it would do to his life.
Well, he must have had a great way with the crowd. Ken Venturi said of him, he said, if they locked the gates and didn't allow anybody in, Billy Joe would never break 8. But he played to the crowd, and obviously he hit it in some different places. He wasn't the straightest driver. And Bobby Jones told a story, said his wife loved watching him play, and she suggested one time to Bobby Jones, said, we've named these bridges for for Hogan and for Nelson here at Augusta. Shouldn't we name a bridge for Billy Joe? Not thinking that, well, the water would sort of come into play. And Bobby Jones says, well, I don't think he likes anything that spans the water. He said, but the first time I ever saw him play, he was in the right trees on 14, so we'll call him Patton's Woods from now on.
I never heard that. I never heard that.
Do you remember the best shot or best moment you had with him watching him?
Maybe, well, there are a lot of great shots. But one was at the U.S. Open in 1957 in Toledo at Inverness. Billy Joe was playing with Jerry Barber, and Ron, his dad, and I were inside the ropes walking with him. And on the this is actually the 36th hole, the second day. Jerry Barber put it in there about 6 feet from the pin. Billy Joe turned around and waited and says, watch this. Get it 3 feet from the hole. and he made it for a 36-hole score of 138, which was then a U.S. Open record. Unfortunately, he got in a slugging match with Roberto Di Vincenzo on Saturday and went for a couple of 76s. But we had a good time. That was a great shot. I don't know. I'm not sure I ever saw him. I did not see the hole in one.
The Augusta Chronicler, describing how he played, said Billy Joe would charge hell with a bucket of ice water, which sounded about right. He became a rules official, as you mentioned earlier, in later years at Augusta. And Ben Crenshaw, when he was trying to win his first Masters, told the story of being in the 13th fairway in 1984, trying to decide, does he go for the green or not? And he looked over and saw Billy Joe Patton and said, I gotta go. And went for it and hit it. Obviously didn't work out for Billy Joe, but he went on to win that Masters. And just all the things he did. There was a great story about him as a 43-year-old. I guess he won the Carolinas Am, and he said, my family thought it was just another trophy I'd won. But I knew where I was in my career, and I might not win any more of these. And everybody left, said, I got in my car, in my convertible with my trophy, peeled out of town, going down to two-lane road, and let out the damnedest yell anybody ever heard. How much he loved playing golf. And he was in the lumber business, and it was a different time. Why did he not pursue professional?
That's an interesting story. Billy Joe was a very thoughtful person. When you got to know him, and had a real serious vein in him. And he and I talked a good bit about why he didn't turn pro or the pros and cons of it. And he was very honest about it. He said, I'm not sure my nerves would have taken the life of a pro. And he said, the whiskey, the women, all that stuff. He was very frank. I just don't think I could have stood it. And then he said as an afterthought, he said, I'd be a damn lousy
That was at Pinehurst.
Was it Pinehurst?
On number 2.
Was it Pinehurst? I think
Second
right.
hole, hit it out of bounds.
Yeah.
And some woman cruised by and rolled down the window.
Yeah. The access road crossing.
About 15 minutes, you can have mine.
He preceded Arnold, I guess, by a few years. At least Arnold's biggest years came a couple years later. But was he like? Were they similar or?
Yes. Arnold, the magnetism was the same, but Arnold didn't talk to the gallery quite as much. You know, Billy Joe, he had so many. He told her one time, said, "I get my mail down here," all that sort of stuff, and it was worth the price of admission. I'd say that.
We were going to open up if anybody has any questions. I don't know that I can answer. I'm sure Mr. Smallwood here could, but if anybody has any questions or thoughts they would like to share, we're wide. Mr. Granger, sir.
Ron, you still follow professional golf weekly. Who on the tour would you equate in terms of personality that would be equal to Billy Joe?
Wow, that's a good question. Personalities on the tour have changed. They're very much managed now.
Well, I mean, think about Billy Joe with social media.
Yeah. And dirty little secret, almost none of those tweets you read by those tour players are written by them. But you can tell the ones that are, and they probably regret them. God, that's a good question. I don't know. Well, in his own way, and this, I think this is a good comparison, but in his own way, Boo Weekley has his own charm. Who else? I would not say Bubba Watson. No. Maybe a little Phil Mickelson. But Phil likes to be the smartest guy in the room, but I don't think Billy Joe had it that way.
He's embraced social media recently.
Yes, he has. Yes, he has.
If anybody has taken the opportunity to watch that, he's got quite a sense of humor.
Yes.
Can I tell you a quick story?
Please.
About, I'm from Oregon, and Billy Joe, after Cliff Roberts, after he almost won the Masters in '54, Cliff asked him to be a member. And the interesting thing about Billy Joe, this is the Donald Ross golf course at Mimosa Hills in Morgan. That's where he learned to play. He took every member at Mimosa Hills to Augusta to play. Of course, Billy Joe was very potty. He hadn't played for all the way. But he would take you down there to every member at Mimosa to play at Augusta, which was, fascinating. But the story that I really want to tell when you're talking about Arnold Palmer, my sophomore year at Davidson, that was the year after Billy Joe almost won it, and the YMCA was very big at Davidson at that time, and I got to be a really good friend with the youth director that they just hired. And so he said, "Let's go to the Masters." He said, and I can't remember whether it's my roommate or my best friend, but he said, let's go to the Masters, because he's playing in Augusta in the Masters for the first time. And so about 3 or 4 of us got in his car and we drive to Augusta. And we argued the whole time about who we were gonna follow. And I said, well, you know, Billy Joe almost won the thing last year, we're gonna follow Billy Joe. And so we decided we'd follow Billy Joe the first 9. The second 9 we'd follow his room. So we followed Billy Joe, and back then you didn't have ropes. You could just walk, fairway. And so I introduced it, of course, being from Oregon, I knew Billy Joe well. So I introduced him to all my friends, and so we walked down the fairways with him. As Billy Joe does, he hops all the time. And so we got to number 9, and we switched over to his roommate. You know who it was? Arnold Palmer. Fascinating. We walked the next 9 holes with Arnold Palmer. He had never won anything, he wasn't anything, but that's it. Was Arnold Palmer.
That's awesome.
President Eisenhower always chose Billy Joe to play with him because he knew that he would always win.
There's a couple other things about playing with Eisenhower. One of the things that Billy Joe was very graciously but proud of was when he had his wedding anniversary party at Augusta. There were only about 45 members of Augusta invited to that party, and Billy Joe was one of them. And he wound up playing bridge with Eisenhower also, did he not? Are you familiar with that?
I don't believe he was a bridge player. He might have been.
I was.
He was a bridge
Didn't they play
player, but not a
Pinochle?
good
Pinochle?
No. That's why I got he said if I lost, I got to play another night. Anyway, I just thought that was another poignant thing about Billy Joe. He didn't broadcast this, but he was very proud of the fact that he was honored that way. And there's one other thing I want to add about his accomplishment. The North-South Amateur in its day was at least the third ranking amateur tournament in the world, just behind the U.S. and British championships. And Billy Joe one time won 19 consecutive matches in the North-South, and sandwiching that and the National Amateur that came right after that, he won 25 out of 27 matches on number 2, and that provoked the great Richard Tuff to say that he doubted that any amateur, that feat had never been accomplished by anybody and is not likely to be accomplished again. That stretch of victories on a great golf course like number 2. And I think that's one of the signal parts of Billy Joe's legacy as a competitive golfer.
Any more questions? Any more stories anybody wants to share?
My wife went to boarding school with Best Patton at Salem Academy. Her name was Harriet Best. They were roommates. In 1970, Billy Joe called and said, "Girls, get on Piedmont and come on down. We're going to stay in the Eisenhower cottage." And they went to the headmistress. They were supposed to arrive Friday. And they said, "We got to leave, we're going down to this golf tournament." And they said, "No, you got Latin on Friday, you're not going in." And Harriet's father was an avid golfer. He said, "Harriet, quit the goddamn school."
Well, if there are no other questions or stories, or you have anything?
No? Except there'll never be another one like it.
Sounds like it.
You got the whole thing?